Right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from whichever part of the world you're joining. In this hyper-connected world, the issue of security in the digital age is paramount. We have today with us Marcus Kramer, who has been behind the IGF and Chairman Emeritus of the IGF. Marcus, is over to you for the opening remarks, and we're blessed to have you.
Thank you, Rajendra. Good afternoon, good morning, whatever you are in whatever part of the world. Let me say a few words to introduce this webinar. It's the second webinar in a series of 4. It's an experiment in a way, but we show that the dynamic coalitions collaborate in terms of substance. Let me start by saying a few words about the dynamic coalitions. For the IGF insiders, they know what they are, but not everyone is an IGF insider, and I think they deserve an explanation. Dynamic coalitions have been with the IGF since its inception in 2006. There were spontaneous groups of people, bottom up, who follow us, join together for a same purpose, working on the same theme. So it's a very loose, bottom-up and autonomous arrangement. They have very few rules. They are recognized by the Secretariat, and they need to follow some basic rules. We call them the 3 O's. They need to be open to everybody who wants to join. They need to have open archives and open mailing lists, and produce a report, an annual report of their activities. If they do that, then they are recognized as dynamic coalitions of the Internet Governance Forum. But they are very independent by nature, and they're also very jealous of their independence. So there is no one size fits all. They're all very different from each other. And also in terms of substance they cover, some of them are more there to exchange information, share experiences. Others work together on substantive issues. And today we gather all the dynamic coalitions who in one way or another work on security in the digital age. And as Rajendra said, that is an important issue. And security has been with the IGF as a major theme right from the beginning. When we started in 2006, we had 4 major themes. Security was one of them. The other 3 were diversity, openness, and access. And these 4 themes covered more or less all the facets of the discussions we have still today. I think they're all very relevant. Openness remains relevant. Diversity remains as relevant as ever, with the use of all the languages. And inclusiveness remains equally relevant. Now, security, we had many main sessions in the past. We had many workshops in the past. And since 2014, we have also a best practice forum on cyber security, but we will hear more of that in the course of this discussion. So with that, I think I hand over to our moderator, Rajendra, and thank you for your attention. Thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Marcus. I think without history, it is not proper to continue, but I'm sure you gave a very good background and a sense of people, how important is security for IGF and for the world. For all of us, we know that we live in a very hyper-connected world and so are hyper-vulnerable. And I'll give you some statistics of why security is important. And this should give us a sense that, no matter what you do, which sector you are, which part of the world you are. So in 2023, there was a ransomware attack on one of the largest hospitals rated among the top 100 in the world. For 6 days, they had to shut down. Just imagine with an outpatient department of 10,000 people over what happens. And the losses were estimated to be 67 million. In again, 2023, a medical institute lost 815 million electronic health records, the data of people, very sensitive data. And this This has implications on people's health. This also had the data of top politicians in that country, their health records. In 2016, Bangladesh, the SWIFT codes were broken in a very carefully planned manner on a Friday, which is a holiday. 81 million was lost. I think the plan was 1 billion, but they were actually caught because they missed the word. In foundation, they missed D. So the people caught it. But SWIFT codes were also broken, and this 81 million was never recovered. In 2020, the solar wind break led the compromise of national security records in the United States. In 2021, cyber attack on the Colonial Pipeline led to fuel shortages across the eastern United States. And in 2021, the European telecom giant suffered 40 million data breaches. So if you look at any sector, it really doesn't matter. The point is that we have moved way ahead of just considering passwords, firewalls, and encryption as security. We have gone much ahead. Artificial intelligence and quantum computing present a new threat, but also it's a new opportunity. So this is changing the rules of the game. Security is no longer an issue of the IT department. It's an issue for the policymakers, for the boardrooms, and for households. It's an imperative. We cannot just let that discussion go. The battleground is invisible, but the consequences of ignoring that are devastating. We know that, and we have to defend ourselves today and for the future. And at IGF, we are discussing the issues that matter with the people that matter. That makes us really important to focus on the issue of security. And look at the panel we have. Marcus, who is diplomat with a seasoned experience and behind IGF, played a key role. We have Dinu Castaldo Dalasio, CIO of the UN's Joint Staff Pension Fund, has implemented blockchain security solutions across 80,000 UN pensioners, represents the DC Blockchain Assurance. Dr. Haudachi from the DC Digital Health Devon Technologies, contributor to Africa Union expert on cybersecurity, and is an expert on wireless communication and telecom. Esther, she's from the IGF Best Practices Forum, and she's also the Ariat is also the focus on protection against the internet access and context of conflicts. And she also represents the DC coordination group as the MAG license in the working group. Mark Carwell, Senior Policy Advisor to the Internet Standard Security and Safety Coalition, IS3C, a member of the EuroDIG, which is the UN Regional IGF, and IGF Working Group on Strategy. He's a leader in this domain. We have Liz Orambo, Tech Policy Leader, works at the intersection of technology and human development, previously with the Oxford Global Cybersecurity Center. And we have Mavish, she's from the DC Digital Health, formerly with the Innovation Working Group Asia, set up by the UN Secretary General, worked on various committees of the Government of India, and represents DC Digital Health. And with this panel, I would actually move to ask Mark Carwell on his opening remarks on this important issue of cybersecurity in the digital age. Mark, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Rajendra, and hello, everybody. I'm based in the UK, and my history goes back to UK government. I was internet governance policy lead for the UK in a wide range of fora, including ICANN, IGF, going all the way back to the second IGF in Hyderabad, I think it was, over the years. So I've been tracking and involved in IGF activities and intersessional activities. And I'm here participating on behalf of IS3C, Internet Standards Security and Safety Coalition, which was launched in 2020. Its coordinator is Wout de Natris, who's very active in this area, this policy area. And our mission is to address the problem that Wout had written about, actually, in a research paper commissioned by the IGF Secretariat and the MAG, as as I recall, about the failure to deploy internet security standards. We have this these standards developers, who are committed to as a community of technical experts to developing standards, but the follow-up in terms of deployment and implementation really has no effective global coordination. And Wout's research identified really major failures to implement key security standards that would ensure that online activity is secure and safe. So the research he did led to the formation of this coalition, IS3C, and it comprises experts in the field from across the world, from Latin America, Africa, Europe, North America, Asia, and it's a common shared goal for all the experts involved in the coalition to identify ways of addressing this failure to deploy effectively and rapidly key internet security standards and related best practices. There was no kind of sharing of best practice in terms relating to internet security standards. So that's the common goal, the mission of the coalition, if you like. And we've over the years we've established, I think it's 9 working groups altogether, covering specific areas. The Internet of Things and security by design relating to the Internet of Things, education, procurement, which is the focus of our contribution to this session, how procurement contracts can actually stimulate the adoption and deployment of internet security standards through the contracts that are drawn up by governments, by big organizations, whoever is actually procuring internet devices and setting up networks and so on. So this range of working groups has produced various papers. We've done papers on education and skills, what is required in terms of skilling up key people in the cyber sector with knowledge about the key standards is an important aim that will help address the deficiencies of awareness and knowledge about security standards. Research done by a working group relating to the Internet of Things has produced a number of recommendations, and that work will continue. And we've also looked at deployment of DNSSEC and RPKI as critical standards through identifying ways for promoting their adoption and implementation much more extensively across the world. And we're now looking at the consumer side, how consumer protection agencies can actually contribute to promoting knowledge about internet security standards so that users, ordinary users, consumers, small businesses and so on have access really to the key information about how to protect themselves through deploying effectively key standards and what they buy. So that's the history of the coalition, and then at the IGF in Riyadh we published a 4-point action plan for the year ahead, which encompasses 4 elements. I should say 4 points, 4-point action plan. Firstly, we had a proposal to set up a cybersecurity hub that would bring together the education sector with industry to promote effective inclusion of security skills in curricula, educational curricula and training programs. So that's the first one. Promoting on Internet of Things, promoting best practice and combining research there with post-quantum cryptography. This is the research project which is now launching. We've got support from AFNIC, the French domain name registry, for this work. This is now a project rolling out. We will produce a report in time, we hope, for the IGF in Oslo. The key point from this action plan that we want to highlight here is rolling out a toolkit for public and private procurement agencies that specify how contracts with suppliers should build in specific security requirements. And so I'm going to hand over now to my colleague from the coalition, Liz Orembo, who was one of the authors of the report that IS3C did on procurement and supply chain management that came out about a year ago. And this is now following up on that report with a program of action. So I'm going to hand over to Liz, who I know she's joined. And so Rajendra, shall I just simply hand over to Liz to take over from me?
Sure, Mark. You made
Okay.
very important points, which are critical for us, for anyone. I think you made this point of embedding security by design and default in government contracts. A very critical point for the governments because they have a crucial role in ensuring this is a topic for everyone. And also the point of addressing not only in isolation, but through devices and networks. So very comprehensive ecosystem approach, I must say. Thank you so much and look forward to listening to Liz Orembo.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for that introduction, Rajendra. My name is Liz Orembo. I am a member of IS3C. I led a workshop of procurement and supply chain on internet security, global internet security. You did mention that previously I was with JCC, but you didn't mention where I am currently on my day-to-day. That I work also with Research ICT Africa. I don't know how much time I have, but I'll try to highlight the key findings that we had on procurement and supply chain. The reason why we undertook this research is that we were concerned about the global developments or the evolution of technology and the status of where we were on technology. But then another point that also came through is that the stability of the global internet actually just depends on the types of devices we use, and that's highly also, and even software systems that we use, which is highly dependent on how organizations, countries, and even at personal level, how we procure these things, because it's in our procurement and use that we actually determine what the market, the supply chain will look like. And if we don't, if there's not much demand for highly standardized security devices and systems, it means that the whole, not the whole internet, part of the internet infrastructure and cyberspace is not secure itself. So we went out to look at what are the patterns of procurement that governments, now from the public sector, use, whether there are policies and guidelines on procurement. And what we found is that it's a bit uneven, but where there are standards of procurement, it's common on what those guidelines and standards were. We could point out to them. So from our research, we find that in the global south, we found very little, if there was any, standards on procurement, and it was they were mainly focused on interoperability, looking at how systems can work together, and even continuity, specifying that when a product is procured, it's able to work with the systems that is already in place. There are countries and regions that had more elaborate procurement standards. Those included issues like political stability, so that when there's need for system updates, then they can rely on the foreign companies from within and without and outside, providing technology and technology services that they are able to provide continuity of services. Security policies, kind of like GDPR, requiring that protections of citizens in other countries are similar to what, when you're protecting data, the policies are similar to what the country that is giving the regulation has the same, ensuring the same kinds of protection. Country procurement standards actually gave guidelines, standards or guidelines, pointed out that foreign companies need to have the same security policies or the same kinds of protection. The other thing was update standards on updating security and software. There needed to be that assurity that after deploying a system that the service provider is able to provide, continue providing services up to periods even 5 years. Some didn't mention it, they didn't mention the periods, but they would give a provision that it would go beyond installation or acquisition of technical systems. These are there are those procurement standards that also spoke to procedures of handover, what would entail in handover, training, and also updating manuals, points of contacts, and things like that. So that is what we found. Governments like US, Netherlands, UK had very, and even Taiwan from Asian countries, and Italy, they had very elaborate procurement standards. Again, what was missing is those in the global north. And you could see that even from in the procurement, open procurement standards, these are the same governments that are very active in the negotiation and in the development of procurement standards. What we didn't see alarmingly was that even among governments and countries that are active or have elaborate guidelines on cybersecurity standards, they were not really using the global open security standards. So that was a big problem there, because standards bodies, IEEs and ISO bodies, which really spend so much time, and there's a lot of negotiations, had to build consensus. But once a security standards is out, there's no there are no mechanisms to follow up through on how this are taken in, either by the industry or even the governments themselves. So they're not very popular yet. I would say that their popularity is something in question, or not many countries are taking into their own procurement guidelines. There's also a lack of global coordination and awareness among these open standards, and also on the role of procurement itself, because as we were doing this research, doing desktop research, and also engaging ministries, sub-ministries, and people working on procurement, there was no that much awareness about how to go about procuring IT devices. The only condition or awareness was that the systems just need to be secure. Some of them, there were histories where they were caught off guard, where security products are procured, and then after some time, when there's a security issue, there's no even point of contact to get from the service provider end. So with those findings, what we recommended was for IS3C to build a curriculum for what to consider when procuring ICT, the importance of the role of ICT in the security of the internet itself, and even cybersecurity even at a national level and even household level. There's also a need to build an agenda on this topic, as well as capacity building, which I mentioned that this curriculum would really help a lot with capacity building. So that's it from the research. I'd also like to touch about an ongoing research that we are having. Is on IoT and cybersecurity. And again, we are looking at regulations, country regulation, regional regulation. And here we are looking at the problem of IoT by design themselves. The IoT devices that are coming into the market, they don't have capacity for some of the evolved cybersecurity environment that we are operating in, things like quantum, the age of quantum computing right now, vis-a-vis the influx of IoT devices, be it camera, be it fridges, and some of them tiny devices like USBs can just be plugged into maybe monitors, and it renders a whole institution vulnerable to cybersecurity. I hope we'll have some chance next time to share about this research, because by next time we'll have findings out. I am happy to have questions either now or as you direct, moderator.
Thank you. There's a very interesting point, and I think we have realized post-COVID the criticalness of supply chains. You articulated very well that there is a divide between global North and global South, and you've also put the very crucial point of security assurance when it comes to supply chain, and also the capacity building part, I think, which is a very important theme to pursue if you want to address the issue of security. We have with us today the luxury of having Wim Degesel. I hope I have got his name right, consultant to the IGF on cybersecurity and the best practices forum. So, Wim, we would want your viewpoint on this important topic, followed by Enrit.
Thank you. Just checking that you can hear me.
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. Like you introduced me, I'm Wim Degesel. I work as a consultant with the IGF Secretariat on best practice forums, and particularly the best practice forum on cybersecurity. Best practice forums, maybe a quick word, they are very similar to DCs. They are an intersessional activity that works and continue to work between IGF meetings. There's one very specific difference is that best practice forums really originate from the IGF itself, originate from the MAG. It is the multi-stakeholder advisory committee that selects one or two topics and then asks BPF to work on that topic during a year. For the rest, in a very similar way as the DC, worked in an open way, tried to be bottom up, works with regular open meetings, and trying to or aiming to come up with an output, written output by the IGF meeting itself to discuss at the IGF meeting. So that's for the idea of best practice forums. I've been involved for a number of years in the best practice forum on cybersecurity. There also have been best practice forums on other topics, for example, IPv6, gender and digital rights, etc. Now, a quick overview of what we have been doing in the previous years on the best practice forum cybersecurity before I hand over to Henriette to discuss and focus on this year's work. There have been a number of best practice forums since, I think, 2018 that focused or have been working around cybersecurity norms. They approached the whole idea of cybersecurity norms from different angles, trying to understand how norms, cybersecurity norms or cyber norms are developed, how they are institutionalized or socialized, and what works, what has not been working in norms. I would like to refer to the IGF website, as you can find the different reports from the previous years there, as I have a number of interesting findings. But I would like to highlight two things. We did one is an important observation that was made by the Best Practice Forum with regard to the involvement of stakeholders, where through the discussions it became clear, and through the exchange of experiences, it became clear how important it is to involve stakeholders and different stakeholders in the whole norms process. And this means that when cybersecurity norms or cyber norms are being developed or are being discussed at sometimes very high levels, it is important that stakeholders are involved, because stakeholders can come with very concrete practical experiences of what a norm wants to solve or tries to solve. But also in the later processes, when a norm, a cyber norm, has to become socialized, it is yet again very important to have and to be able to count on the stakeholders to do the work. So that is one of the findings that came up through the work in the previous years. Another topic I really would like to highlight is in 2022, the Best Practice Forum developed an interesting paper on the difference between cybercrime and cybersecurity. It is, I think, a 50-page maximum paper, but that very clearly makes a difference between the two concepts, as they very often in discussions or mixed up. And if you and with the result that the people that are interested in cybercrime or people that are dealing with cybersecurity are often do not understand each other because of this mix-up. So this is what we have been working on this year, and Red will tell you the focus is completely different, but again, with the same principle, trying to learn from the experiences of different stakeholders and combine this and bring this to the discussion. So I think, Henriette, I hand it over to you to talk about this year.
Thanks very much, Wim, and thanks, Rajendra, and everyone for making this possible. Apologies that my camera isn't working. Yes, so in fact, there is a link between the BPF focus this year and the work that was done previously on norms, on cyber norms. I myself was what was referred to at one point part of a norm entrepreneurial initiative, the Global Commission on the Stability of Cyberspace. In fact, we were very honored that the Best Practice Forum studied our work and how we came up with our norms. This was a commission convened with support from the Dutch government and various other institutions, research institutions, that developed cyber norms that were different from many other in that they were multi-stakeholder norms. They were addressed not just to state actors, but also to non-state actors. One of the norms that we came up with was the norm to protect the public core of the internet. We worked with an existing norm that had emerged or first developed by someone called an academic called Dennis Pruders at the University of Leiden. who looked at the internet, in fact, and the core internet resources, the addressing system and the naming and numbering system of the internet as a public resource that should be protected at all times. And what we did in the Global Commission was to actually take it a step further and said that transmission media are also part of the public core, because if there are no fiber optic cables, if there are no digital lines, if there are no connectivity infrastructure, then what does it help to have a working addressing and numbering system? We came up with a norm to protect the public core. And what's been really interesting about this norm, and WIM, in a sense, I think this raises some questions about your points as well, is that we were actually in the end quite successful in getting governments or governmental organizations to accept this norm. And it's been more or less accepted. It was in the group of governmental experts report, in a slightly different way, but it's there. The European Commission also has worked with it and accepted it. The Paris Peace process, the Paris Accord also adopted it. But when it came to dealing with the technical organizations like ICANN, for example, we could not convince them to endorse this norm to protect the public core. So that's just an interesting, I think, challenge for us. You get better norms when you develop them in a multi-stakeholder way, but when it comes to accepting accountability and responsibility for compliance with norms, governments and governmental entities are actually, in some ways, I think, more comfortable with doing that. So to get to this year's Best Practice Forum, at the IGF in last year in Riyadh, there was a main session that really looked at what happens to protecting and securing access to the internet and the core internet resources in times of conflict and crisis. We looked at a few cases. We looked at the Maldives, a country that is very, very prone to having its internet infrastructure destroyed by climate change related natural phenomena, storms and tsunamis. We looked at the case of Gaza, where there's a war, an onslaught, where the infrastructure has not just been, the communications infrastructure has not just been destroyed accidentally, it was actually destroyed quite deliberately. And then we also looked at the case of Sudan, again, a country that's been more or less without internet for years now. And we looked at the case of Russia and the Ukraine, which was a very interesting case because there was a specific request made to ICANN, for example, to remove Russia from the internet addressing system. A request that was refused. So what we want to do with this, excuse me, sorry, I've got a bit of a cold. What we want to do with this BPF is look at what are the good practices about ensuring that people, particularly civilians, have secure access to the internet in times of conflict, which is when they need it most, and what are the normative agreements, frameworks, or processes to ensure that this core internet infrastructure remains available in times of conflict and crisis, whether it is vulnerability, whether the vulnerability of that infrastructure and the core internet resources is due to natural or deliberate or accidental attack, doesn't matter. We want to look at what are the normative contexts and what are the current practices, particularly good practices, to ensure that people and institutions, particularly those involved in humanitarian relief, always have access to the internet. And I think that's kind of maybe more or less, Wim, I don't know if you want to add more about what we'll be doing. We're going to take this work in stages. We'll start by looking at some existing work and compiling that, analyze that, some existing good practices, some existing challenges. And essentially, we want to emerge with a I think, a set of guidelines about what do we need to do? And particularly, what does the multi-stakeholder internet governance community and the IGF itself, what can it do to strengthen this normative framework and the adherence and accountability for adherence to this normative framework to ensure that core public internet resources are always protected? Back to you, Rajendra, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, and I think very insightful. When I look at the context of what you spoke, is the norm to protect the public core of the internet, as a public resource. And when we look at the global discussions happening where we are talking of digital public infrastructure and digital public goods, I think your point of better norms being developed when you work with multi-stakeholders, and if we move from good practices to guidelines, this will be helpful to strengthen the normative framework, which is really crucial, if we really want to address the issue of internet security. And I think Wim pointed a very important point that security and crime, the cybersecurity and cybercrime are different, but at the same time, cybersecurity, lack of cybersecurity can lead to cyber crimes because the data gets exposed. Very important conversations, and I think very thought provoking. In fact, each one of these topics can lead to one webinar each. But having said that, thank you so much for making this contribution. And now I move to Dr. Haudachi. She comes with a fantastic background of working in the telecommunication, given the fact that we live in the world of 5G and now coming to 6G. Dr. Chi, I hope I got your
Hello.
name
Oh,
right.
thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I hope that you could hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for this great introduction, Mr. Rajendra. Okay, so hello everyone. So my name is Huda Shehi. I'm PhD in Telecom Signal Research at UNIFCOM Lab of Subcom Tunisia. I'm also ICANN and IETF fellow. My main research and sectors of interest are related to internet governance, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, women in tech in general.
Did I lose you?
So
Go ahead, please.
could you still hear me?
I guess I lost you. I don't know about the others. Mark, did we lose her in between? Can you
No.
hear her?
If there is any issue, I can repeat.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Could hear. Okay, good. I can continue. Okay, so as I said before, for my intervention, I will speak of the threat and or the paradox behind the use of artificial intelligence. As you know, nowadays artificial intelligence is required and is integrated everywhere. But with the advancement and great progress of new technology and emerging of new technology, which is every day we hear about emerging of new generative AI, and new technology coming up. So there is emerging of it is joined with emerging of advanced threats that are a threat of our life. It's true that artificial intelligence is a tool of automation of tasks. It saves time, so we can focus in other more complicated issues. We have a better quality of life. But if artificial intelligence algorithms are done without control, we lose, and our life will be in threat, because it will harm us, and it will be a drawback and not a benefit in our life. So if we take the example of autonomous cars, so if we use or if we have a misinformation or a problem in the collected data, so because as all of us know, the artificial intelligence algorithms are based in data sets and a specific quality of data. So if there is a problem in the collected data, will the artificial artificial intelligence algorithm will run in different way, and the outcome will not be as it is stated in theoretical way. If we take the example of the autonomous cars or healthcare sector, imagine that we run an algorithm which is biased and discriminated, so we will have a lot of problems in roads, and we will have emerging of fake profiles due to misinformation, so our life will be transformed in different way. So now I will speak about the best practices to use artificial intelligence algorithm in safe way. First thing, we need new policies related to the use of artificial intelligence together with cybersecurity, or the intersection between. We have to consider the intersection between artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. Here we need a global conversation between developers, cybersecurity experts, and leadership boards to understand and to state specific rules with policymakers related to each deployed artificial intelligence algorithm, and to test it before any commercialization. Other thing we need, so a capacity building of the users of artificial intelligence algorithm, and upskilling and reskilling, because always we have, and we speak we were with about different variants of generative AI. So we need to always keep updated, keep learning, and sharing information between all the staff in the same companies to be safe. We need also benefit of artificial intelligence also in cybersecurity in terms of threat intelligence integration, or let's say real-time threat intelligence integration. We need to update in continuous way our used software, and we need to reduce bias and hallucination. We need to account on human vigilance in terms of consents and agreement about the collected data. We need also to not lose our information, to go for a data backup, to not because nowadays we speak about ransomware as servers. So and there is emerging of cyber crimes. So let's keep our data and save it in safe way, to not be in threat to cyber crimes actors. And another important thing is to call our regulators and industry, and to convince policymakers in building new rules related, or new policies related to the use of artificial intelligence for both cybersecurity and technology at the same time. So for staff, we need to give them awareness related to using strong passwords, and to not open their, for example, let's take the example of doctors or medical staff in general, to not open their medical apps in using public Wi-Fi. So let's use VPNs and network segmentation, and let's use multi-factors related to passwords, and let's use complicated passwords to be safe. So also we need to keep our softwares always updated, and we need also to combine AI-driven cyber vulnerability with cybersecurity measures in terms of incident response. So we need to teach staff about our upskilling in incident response. Another important thing is related to encryption, which is a technique that can help protect the confidentiality and integrity of any usage AI application or algorithm. So this is that's it from my side.
Dr.
And,
Jihi,
thank you so much, and I'm up. Thank you.
very important points, and I think you raised this important point of the AI paradox. While it is a threat, but you also can use AI for, the threat intelligence, reduce bias and hallucination. I think the regulation and the role of industry and various stakeholders. I think the point you made about not just the discretion in usage, but not just in development as well. So I think important point. This brings me to since you touched upon health, we have the DC Digital Health coordinator, Ms. Mevish Vaishnav with us. Mevish, over to you for your views on this important topic.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta, for giving me this opportunity. I'm Mevish Vaishnav. I'm the coordinator for DC Digital Health. As we all know, health data is very important and it is 20 times valuable. And if we lack security in healthcare, it can lead to cybercrime, as these data are very important and have and can be exploited in future as well. But as all the fellow panelists have already spoken about the challenges that we could face with this, I would like to highlight about the benefits of having digital health technologies like telemedicine, AI, electronic health records, how they can be immense helpful, like streamlining the processes, enhancing the diagnostic capabilities, improving patient care. And every country, I would say, have regulations, security regulations for protecting the data. But there was a time when no rules were followed, and that was the situation when COVID occurred. And we all came together when humanity mattered most than the security part. So I do believe AI can be a threat, but it can be a solution as well. So there are various positive aspects of digital health. It would help in improving the patient engagement and access. Digital tools like patient portals not only improve the efficiency, but they also enhance the doctor-patient relationship by facilitating the easier communication and enabling the faster care. So I do believe hackers have the access using AI where they can forge the data or they can sell the data in the market. But we could use AI in protecting the data and create a proactive security model which can significantly reduce the chances of successful cyber attacks. So we can use the data in that way and we can strengthen the GDPR, HIPAA compliance rules. So such regulations can ensure patient rights. So this is how we can protect the data.
Thank you, Mevish. I think you brought a very interesting part to this debate of humanity versus security. The relationship between the sacred relationship between the doctor and the care seeker, and how these issues are important. This brings me to my very dear friend Dino Castaldo Dalasio, who is from the DC Blockchain Assurance and who has done phenomenal work leveraging blockchain for security. Dino, what's your view on this topic, and what's the work you are doing, and how can we ensure security of what we are talking about, the technologies that you have worked on? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajendra. I'm very happy to be here with the IGF colleagues and friends. So as you introduced me before, I am the Chief Information Officer of the United Nations Pension Fund, and I've been working for the United Nations for almost 25 years. So I want to first and foremost give you a very brief background of my profile in order to then explain what is my focus and what has been my approach in dealing with the specific topic of security, but fundamentally to put security under the overarching topic of assurance. My background is actually in information system auditing, and for a large part of my career, I was in charge of the IT auditing function of the United Nations. In 2017, I was appointed CIO, Chief Information Officer, and I was given the task to address an historical, a 75-year-old problem that the UN Pension Fund had faced, which pertained to the digital identity for proof of life, basically demonstrating that the 80,000 retirees and beneficiaries of the UN Pension Fund residing around the globe in 192 countries were still alive, because this process was historically conducted through the use of a piece of a paper-based form mailed through 192 different postal services, asking the recipient to sign it and return it through the same means. So this process was, of course, often affected by delays, by lost forms, with serious consequence on both parties, the pension fund itself as well as the beneficiary, but was also subject to skepticism and questioning by the governing bodies and the oversight bodies, such as my former colleagues of the United Nations, asking the UN Pension Fund how it could demonstrate that there was no fraud in a process that was paper-based and it was subject to mailing this format, this signature across the globe through 192 different postal services. So proving a negative is impossible. Hence, my approach to this solution was about proving a positive. Hence, design a solution that use biometrics, facial recognition. It used blockchain to create an immutable ledger of the transaction and the entire life cycle of the process. We also added artificial intelligence when the threat of deepfakes became very real, as well as a geolocalization. So what I learned, being obsessed by being a former auditor with the concept of providing assurance, especially to a board of a governing body of the UN composed of the representative of 193 different countries, was about how can the pension fund provide proof of security, of credibility, of reliability, of a solution that makes use of emerging technologies, those that I just mentioned: blockchain, biometrics, artificial intelligence, and geolocalization. And the reality is that what I learned very early in my process was that when you're dealing with emerging technologies, you're dealing with emerging standards. As you heard from my fellow panelists before, the term standards, the term quantum, the term security, it was mentioned numerous times. So my approach to address these issues was to adopt a concrete, hands-on, bottom-up approach. And this basically led my quest, my adventure in finding like-minded people that share the same concern that I had and that I experienced firsthand in leading this solution about the digital identity of the UN Pension Fund. And of course, I can say that the IGF was the perfect and ideal environment. The forum of the IGF was very supportive. And thanks to the IGF, I was able to establish two dynamic coalitions, one on blockchain assurance standardization, and more recently, one on the assurance of emerging technologies. Because as you may have started to appreciate, ultimately, we are not, when we are talking about real case hands-on implementation of this technology, we are not talking about the use of this technology in isolation. Ultimately, these technologies are introduced, are implemented in conjunction, at least with legacy system. There is at least the need for an interface, for an API with existing solution. But more and more also with other emerging technology, hence my case of having blockchain, having biometrics, having artificial intelligence, and understand what are the synergies, what are the strengths and the weaknesses, what are the opportunities and the risks that, for example, a probabilistic technology such as AI may be compensated by a deterministic technology such as blockchain. So, but going back to the concept of assurance and how to prove that these solutions are indeed adopted. My previous panelists speaking about the supply chain and procurement mentioned that there are many ISO standards, but ultimately are not that well followed or adopted. And this is really the problem. that we are trying to address with the dynamic coalition on blockchain assurance and the dynamic coalition on emerging technology. Try to identify best practices, try to find a lesson learned, try to share real case, either pilot or even better, real implementation of this technology, and share those challenges, share those best practices to then give input for the formulation, for the elaboration of standards that can be followed in the real life. So what we did in the dynamic coalition of blockchain assurance and standardization, we adopted and adapted the blockchain maturity model developed by the Government Blockchain Association in Washington, D.C., that is hosting the dynamic coalition itself. In the dynamic coalition of emerging technology, we are looking at new security model that, for example, started to provide more and more evidence. There was a mention about quantum. So quantum is starting to introduce a new reality when it comes to security. We are pretty much, I'm sure, in this audience, all familiar with the triad of security related to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But what we have discovered, for example, I started to address the risk of quantum to the blockchain. What we started to discover that, for example, an older model, 1998, the Parkerian model of cybersecurity that adds 3 additional dimensions, the one about possession, the one about authenticity, the one about utility, it really demonstrates, for example, the concept of quantum, the threat of quantum is really now started to emphasize the relevance of possession. You may have heard the concept and the threat that quantum poses to harvest now, decrypt later. Meaning there is a recognition that quantum technology is not yet capable of breaking encryption algorithm. Although I've been reading recently some news from China, from Asia, that has started to demonstrate that indeed this is possible. Nonetheless, there is a consensus that quantum computing will be able to break encryption in 10 or 15 years. But what's happening now is the fact that there are many instances already proven and documented where certain actors starting to harvest, started to intercept, started to collect encrypted communication, encrypted data, with the intent to then break the encryption of the data when the quantum computing will be a reality. So now the concept of possession of the data itself, even if in encrypted form, is becoming an issue that needs to be considered in the security model, in the threat model, in the risk assessment model that we have been adopting. So I'm going to conclude by sharing my experience. When it comes to standardization, when it comes to assurance with emerging technology, as I alluded to before, we are dealing with emerging reality. There is a patchwork of standards. For example, I was able to certify the UN Pension Fund digital identity solution based on blockchain on the AI standard, the 42001. We became the first UN entity, the first international organization that achieved this certification on the responsible use of AI. But as of today, I have not been able, because it doesn't exist, I have not been able to certify the solution on an ISO standard for blockchain, because the ISO organization still has not issued a certifiable standard of blockchain. So what I did, speaking about security, I certified the solution with the ISO 27001, which is a certification standard for information security management system. And I had to adopt and adapt that standard by identifying specific risk, specific threat about information security. So I'm concluding to say that for those who are interested in joining us, we are also trying to practice what we preach. We have organized the Dynamic Coalition on Blockchain Assurance Standardization in a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. We are still piloting because you can appreciate it's not an easy task. And we want to govern ourselves through a DAO in order to demonstrate that we meet the expectation and the principle of the IGF for accountability, for transparency, and for inclusivity. So for those who are interested, please consult the IGF website. You will find all the relevant details about our periodic meetings. And of course, as Marcus alluded to before, it's open to everybody. Thank you, and back to you, Professor Rajendra.
Thank you, Dunu. You made very important points about the probabilistic technology like AI and the deterministic technology like blockchain. Now, here is where this challenge is coming. The way technologies are advancing, the issue is of the resilience of the systems, how they manage that. And my next question is to Mark, Wim, and Andret in that order. So, Mark, there is always a challenge of how do you develop, or rather predict the risk of what's coming. Now, there is something that we always take recourse to call ethical hacking. Now, given the work that agentic AI is doing, if agentic AI take over the role of, cracking the secure systems on a real-time basis using AI, I will not much be worried about quantum now because quantum is not so much democratized. In a few years, it will be. Now, how is IS3C, looking at addressing the issue using ethical hacking? Are we doing something in this area? Are we working on the area of agentic issues on security? If agent starts hacking a system on a real-time basis, how do we address them? To you, Wim, and Andret.
Thanks, Rajendra. If I understood your question, what are we doing in IS3C with regard to resilience and security against criminal hacking? Is that what the point you're making?
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, of course, this is highly relevant to the mission of the coalition. We are looking at IoT resilience, certainly, and also post-quantum cryptography. I mean, this is a new area for us. We are bringing in experts in that field to examine, and with the aim really of developing concrete recommendations that can be addressed to government policymakers, to law enforcement agencies, to the technical community, and organizations really involved in protecting the rights of people. This is our target audience. It's a very wide scope, and we are all constantly looking for ways to broadcast the results of our research, the results of our deliberations, and also to bring in more people. That's so important for this dynamic coalition model, to draw on experience from across the world. I mean, this is where different policies are being implemented. Maybe they can be relevant to other countries in other regions, in other continents. So, what you're saying really is, I think, so important in terms of how dynamic coalition approach the work, and producing valuable recommendations, toolkits. I mean, we are very, very committed to developing toolkits, and then finding ways to say to people, look, this is what we've done. This is where we're filling a gap here, and this will contribute to strengthening security and safety online. That's in our title, the 3 S's: standards, security, and safety. IS3C, that's the 3. So that's certainly our approach. We're constantly moving into new areas, and post-quantum cryptography is a new area for us. I hope that gives you an indication of how we are open and developing new areas of focus in our work, and what we want to produce as a result of that work.
Thanks, Mark. I think Wim had to log off. Andret, you're available for answering on this response.
Thanks, Rajendra. Yes. So, look, I think ethical hackers are part of the ecosystem, and they play a very important role. But I think that, the thing about cybersecurity is that and I mean, I think it was someone talked about the a bottom up approach. I think it was Dino, but I think what we need to recognize with cybersecurity is that the ecosystem is becoming more diverse, but a lot of the insecurity is also embedded in that ecosystem because insecurity is embedded in internet-based business models. The fact that our data is all over the place, that the big internet companies themselves are not always all that vigilant when it comes to how they deal with the data of the users that they make their money out of. It's kind of all embedded in the system. And if you look at often where are most of the threats, if you do any analysis of the most frequent type of cybersecurity attack at present, they are ransomware attacks. So ransomware is not something that ethical hackers can necessarily very help with. How do you protect against ransomware? Most of the huge, big ransomware attacks are through bugs being planted, through weaknesses and backdoors, but it's often because of public authorities and public infrastructures and systems like National Health Services not having the capacity or not being resourced or vigilant enough to keep their systems up to date and secure. And so ethical hackers might not help with that. So I think we can't get away from the fact that there is a shared responsibility for security. And I think something that's very important, and I think it is a shift, is that we can't just make the individual end user responsible. Obviously, we all have to practice cyber hygiene, but I think there's a greater level of accountability on those entities and those services, those companies, those government departments that have our data and that provide essential services, that provide financial and support financial transactions. So I think the accountability for ensuring that their systems are secure needs to be taken very, very seriously. Because I think we also have to face the fact that many end users simply don't have the resources to protect themselves. And, looking at the large number of users in Africa, for example, whose only form of financial inclusion is through mobile money, which is notoriously insecure and very, very open to scammers. But then I also wanted to react to the question that Jimson, thanks Jimson for that question, why did ICANN not like the idea of the norm to protect the public core of the internet? Two reasons. I think the one is that ICANN is quite concerned with not crossing boundaries, with working within its own paradigm and its own framework, and particularly at the time that we met with the ICANN board and with the ICANN security bodies. And then the second reason, and this is probably the most significant reason, they did not like the word public. And generally, you will find that any kind of US-based entity or organization feels very uncomfortable with the term public, because in the United States, public means government. It means something or an element, a domain that should be under governmental control. Now, it doesn't mean that to us in South Africa. It doesn't mean that in Europe necessarily, but it does mean that in the US. We often actually come across that kind of barrier, that public is understood to be government or within the care of government.
And did you
I'm
unmute,
done.
I guess?
I'm done, Rajendra. Sorry. And I'm
Thank you.
coughing, but I'm handing back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrej, for answering the question, which I had to ask later, but great answers, great points. You have raised an important point of business models, and I think the issue is not just models today, it's about continuity of businesses, the way we are looking at it. As the world transitions from 5G to 6G, and I think you brought this important point of nations which look at the digital money, which is insecure. Now, we look at the beneficiaries of internet and they eventually become victims. As the one who leads the Dynamic Coalition on Digital Economy, that's a very important topic for us. And this brings me to Dr. Chihi and Liz Osambo to answer, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put internet in terms of being safe and secure? And what's your thought on how far will it take us to reach the level of at least 7 or 8 for now?
Can I start?
Please go ahead.
Okay. I will take the part related to internet security. So it's important that the users of internet knows everything about and have the necessary skills to surf in safe way. So it's required to not open any URLs without knowing it exactly. For related to emails, it's required to not open any email and to be sure about the source and the sender. And it's very important to open important application in safe way. Like for example, it's not possible to open our account or public Wi-Fi's. So be sure about the security measures to open any application. In addition, it's not possible to accept all cookies. For example, if we open any website or we are surfing, sometimes they send us about accepting or not the cookies. So I advise to not accept them because it brings different viruses and it tracks our activities without our consent. So it's important to raise awareness about users of internet to be secure and to not to be harmful for our life. That's it from my side.
Liz?
Thank you, Rajendra. I don't know what score to give. Maybe if I'm too generous, I'll give it a 5 in terms of where we are with security. And I would say that we are playing a catch-up because the internet was not innovated with the idea of security in it. And right now is when we are trying to play catch up with the innovations on top of security. We are trying to add the security layer. We are getting more technologies, quantum computing, AI technologies that are going to hack into the current security encryptions that we have. And Dino mentioned quite very correctly, which is the current problem in the ecosystem, that people are harvesting passwords right now because they know that technology is going to evolve. And with time, even 2 years, they will be able to hack even very complex passwords in 2 seconds. So what does that mean? If you don't change your password, or even if your institution will not upgrade its encryption mechanisms, they will be able to enter into systems. And Rent also said that a lot of data is being cross-border shared out there, personal data, whatever data is being shared. That means people's activity and people's identity is also being shared. So we are also talking about an expanding internet, an expanding area of attack. Because if you started using internet, let's say 30 years ago, by now there are very many points of attack that we are talking about. At the same time, we are having evolved digital technologies that can be used to enter this system. So where we are at right now, yes, we are playing catch up, but I think what would be also most important, because there's no system that is 100% secure. We all rely on frequent updates and all that. What I would like to put more emphasis on is beyond security, after risks, what are the recovery mechanisms? What are the resilience mechanisms that people, nations, and even the globe can adapt. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Liz. I think you made a very important point, and I really like quantifying generously to 5 points on a scale of 10 that how safe it is. And on the resilience, very important example I remember is the CrowdStrike, which canceled almost like 5 to 7,000 flights and cost loss of almost $5 billion. But the beauty of this internet was that we were back up and running in less than 24 hours. So certainly it is resilient, but the issue is always about at what cost. When it is dollars, it is fine. When it is lives, it is not. I mean, you can lose lives too. And this brings me to a very important point. Maybe you are launching Digital Health Sans Borders on 19th May at Geneva. And you made this very important point on security versus humanity. How do you see this when pacemakers are connected with IoT devices, which means that if you hack into the system, it could be fatal. So how do you see this in light of the security issues and health?
So, like you correctly said, Dr. Gupta, yes, IoT-based pacemakers are lifesavers, but though they are attached to the risk of threats, but I would like to state what you always say. If you have food poisoning, you don't stop eating food. So threats will be there, but we need to look for solutions and transition them, the risk into opportunities. Like you gave an example of CrowdStrike. Last year, the AIMS hospital in Delhi had the data breach, but 10 days back, it was listed among the top 100 hospitals. So there will be risk, and even we need to be careful about those data protections. We need to be aware of the threats that system will pose us, but we are also confident that the system will be resilient to come back, bounce back with the addressing such issues. And if we have such technologies, at one side, if we see in the remotest areas like Africa, where health has not been reached to them, technology can help us to reach them. So that is where we are launching the digital health without borders. So technology can be an enabler helping us to take health to all in the country and the entire humanity.
Thank you, Mevish. So you're saying there will be trade-offs between humanity versus security issue. Mark, this brings me, I know you as one of the tallest leaders who are involved in, doing the work as IS3C. There is an architecture how we look at security system. There's an enterprise, there is a system, and there's a solution architecture, where you look at the overall governance versus organization versus projects. Uh, Given that this webinar is not just an academic webinar, we are supposed to come out with the knowledge paper that helps people in thinking about issues, and I think we have covered very interesting facets of security. The key points going up to capacity building, the bottom up approach, and how secure is the internet and what's the way forward. When you see this entire horizon emerging, where do you think the role of governments come in along with private sector? Is self-regulation the best way forward? Because no one knows the future of internet security. As Bob Kahn said, they made the internet, and Marcus Kummer said in the very beginning, is that internet was designed to be open, not secure at the time they devised it. Is it going to be the same way going forward? I know too many questions, but you can answer.
Yes, thank you. A lot of questions. I mean, I'm sure many of us know that we're at a critical point for internet governance with the WSIS Plus 20 review conducted by the member states primarily. It's a multilateral process of the UN, which will be in December. And I think we don't know the modalities really for non-government stakeholders to engage, but there is an undertaking which was in the modalities document for the review, that there should be effective engagement in the review process of non-government stakeholders. And this is a clear signal to the IGF community, including the dynamic coalitions and the other intersessional activities of the IGF to establish the channels for engaging in the review process that will protect and advance the multi-stakeholder model of governance, whereby all the key actors, technical community, civil society, academia, governments, international government organizations, and so on, all have the opportunity to contribute to advancing technologies, rollout of technologies in a way that serves the best interests of humanity, that contributes to social and economic welfare on an equal basis worldwide, that will address all the gaps cracked in terms of resolving, but to involve all stakeholders to work out how to move forward with the advance of technologies in a way that's fully inclusive, and those divides and gaps and the numbers of disconnected people, all those challenges are fully resolved. So I feel quite confident that we will go through the review and the outcome will be positive. It's going to be interesting how it goes. I mean, a lot of us are focused on capacity building, contributing to sustainable development, and achieving the full realization of the 2030 agenda, the role of ICTs. I remember the ITU drew up a very helpful checklist of where ICTs would contribute to the individual sustainable development goals. So it was about 7 or 8, 10 years ago, maybe, you know. That is still highly relevant. And a key message, I think, is to say to the member states, look, we have these fora, we have these initiatives, such as the dynamic coalitions, best practice forum, policy networks of the IGF, all contributing to achieving these goals, addressing those challenges and keeping in step with technology, and the importance of protecting innovation, not going down the road of heavy-handed, top-down institutional regulation that some countries would like to see happen. We need to defend the multi-stakeholder approach in the RIS +20 review process. So I don't know, I kind of responded to your set of questions with a very big picture response, but it's you know, this is our key objective as coalitions of stakeholders for this year, to support the effort to ensure that the outcome of the RIS +20 review in December in the UN does not cut across the bottom-up multi-stakeholder approach. Okay, I'll stop there. I hope that stimulated some thinking anyway.
Thank you, Mark, so much. Henriette, a question to you. Do we need more funding from the governments, you know, to do research on the security issues? Is the funding available enough? If it is, what's your view on that?
Thanks, Rajendra. You know, I think the key to security is collaboration. I think, and that would apply to collaboration and research. But I think you need collaboration at all levels, between the ethical hackers that you talked about, between law enforcement agencies, between the internet technical organizations, between civil society organizations. I think that's really absolutely critical. I think research is very valuable and it is very important, and having funding for research is good, but I think that's not really where the money is needed. I think the money is needed, the funding is needed at the level of supporting resilience, and I think resilience particularly in the public sector, which plays a very important role and which holds people's data. having more capacity there, having more capacity amongst those institutions that hold the public sector and internet companies accountable for acting securely and treating the transactions and the data that they hold and that they work with more securely. So I think, yes, research is part of the equation, but it's not the only one. I think it's an ongoing thing, though. I think we need to, in the sense that I think that you asked how secure is the internet. I don't think the internet is particularly insecure. I think digital is by its nature. The moment that you actually start relying on automation and automated management of information and communications and data, there'll be vulnerabilities. And I think that we just need to build awareness of security. It has to be transversal. I don't think security is a problem that can be solved. I think it's an adjustment. It has to be a way of life to be aware of security, and it has to happen at all layers of the entire ecosystem, from decision making and policy makers to end users. But I think most of the accountability has to sit with those institutions, those companies that operate critical information and communications infrastructure and products and services.
Thank you. And what a message to end with on a collaboration with the key for securing the internet. I know we can continue on this for a very long time. We still have so many things to discuss, but I think we have already crossed the time allocated for this live discussion. I thank you all my fellow expert panelists and those who could join, like Wout, Martin, and others, and the wonderful support of the IGF Secretariat. I give it over to Roman, who is from the IGF Secretariat, to put the closing remarks and vote of thanks. Roman, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Thank you, dear colleagues. I think it was really interesting webinar, and thanks to Dr. Rajendra and his team, for Marcus and Jutta, our co-facilitators, and Henriette as our market liaison. So thanks to everyone. We hope to have 2 more webinars before the IGF 2025 in Norway. So please stay tuned. We'll be further in touch. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.